Eager.
Hey guys, so the counteroffensive or the offensive of Ukraine is well on its way, and I wanted to make this video just kind of discussing some of my thoughts about it, I guess, and also making a comment on this video, this lecture that I found that I highly recommend that you watch. And John J. Mearsheimer, probably have a hard time pronouncing his name, and Max Otte. He's a German presenter. This presentation is absolutely fantastic, and I agree with most of it. I think all of it, but I do have one comment to make about something he says. But first, I guess I want to discuss what's happening in the counteroffensive. If you've been following other people's channels and other people's videos, you probably have seen that it's not going that great for Ukraine. And ultimately, this was always going to be the outcome. Sooner or later, Russia was going to get its shit together and, and basically push Ukrainian shit in. It was always going to happen. And Ukrainians were, like I mentioned again and again, they're too full of ignorance, they're too full of arrogance, and they're too full of cruelty to realize what's going on. And this is the psychological actually element of Western Ukrainians, by the way, that is separate from, I believe, it's a generalization, but it's something I noticed in people from Western Ukraine, and the proper Ukrainians, as they like to call themselves, is they do have these, like, especially the cruelty part, that they really like to shove the knife in and watch people squirm and suffer. It's something the Russians, I don't believe, have. Like, Russians definitely have this stoic kind of like Stalin said, one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. So Russians but do have this kind of like stoic uh, attitude to life, in a way, and they're definitely capable. That's why they're definitely capable of nuclear weapons, as is discussed, by the way, in this video here. So, but I don't believe they have this kind of cruel emotional attitude that Ukrainians have. And a video to exemplify it, and I'll link it down below, is this video, this comedy skit made by Starsky. It's this Ukrainian commentator, and I really hope he does get sent to the front line sooner or later, or nuke falls on him. The joke basically is he's on this like date, Russian date, and the date is pointing to all these things like a kettle and a microwave, and is asking what this is. And I think the implication is that Russia doesn't actually have anything, and everything they have they actually stole from Ukraine. And that's the kind of arrogance and ignorance of Ukraine's position, because he also made a video about analyzing Russian equipment and how crappy it is. And I know it's propaganda, but people like are eating it up, and there's this arrogance and ignorance because Ukraine doesn't barely produces anything themselves, and they have to go out and beg for everything they have. So this is, I don't know, this is arrogance and ignorance kind of combined. Like, Ukraine doesn't have shit. Like, if NATO didn't train Ukraine, they would have already been destroyed. They would have been, if Russia went in back in 2014, that was this, they had 8 years basically of everyone helping them, because they couldn't do anything on their own. So to have this arrogance and make fun of Russians, like, yeah, Russian stuff isn't up to scratch and they have corruption as well, but at least they do produce their own stuff. Like, they're not begging to other countries. I mean, maybe making deals with other countries and sharing technology and things like this, for sure, but they're not out there like begging constantly like Ukrainians are. And at the end, he's like pointing, I think he points to like something, but it ends up being the ashes of the person's family member. So that's the joke, is like, oh well, there's your family member that died and you don't give a shit. And that's the kind of joke that Ukrainians make, and that's the kind of attitude, that's the cruelty that they have. So it is what it is, and this is what got them into the situation, because they don't understand the position in the world. And the position has now become as a destroyed, failed buffer state, and it's going to just keep going and going, and they're going to be destroyed more and more. And the only thing that can, like, quote unquote save them, which will actually completely destroy them, is if NATO steps in. And if NATO steps in, and as is discussed again in this great video, I highly recommend watching it. I will link this video too. They will be completely destroyed. Like, the nukes are going to drop on Ukraine first before they drop anywhere else. Like, so Ukraine will be completely decimated. And of course, with the arrogance and ignorance of Ukrainians, they've been pushing for NATO to get involved from the beginning, from the beginning, without realizing that will mean the complete and utter destruction. But hey, this is what we're dealing with. This is what the situation is, and I don't know. Maybe at some point it will get into their heads. The position will like sink in. But so far, it doesn't seem to be happening. But I don't know. I'm hoping you can. I want to hope for the best, but I don't think there's any kind of direction. I think they need to be like basically beaten into submission to maybe realize what's actually happening. I haven't got a clue what it's gonna take, honestly. So. The other thing I wanted to, I guess, mention is this one thing. So just at the end, this question gets asked about Angela Merkel's, because in the beginning, Angela Merkel actually decided to not include Ukrainians in NATO. And then the question is, well, if she didn't do that, why did she lie about the Minsk agreement? Why was the Minsk agreement implemented just so it can be used to arm Ukraine so they can fight Russians? It doesn't make sense. And I agree with the German presenter here. Now let's hear what he has to say first. I'm just going to add a little bit to it.
Maybe you have a slightly different view as a, let's play amateur psychologist, but probably she did actually believe in Minsk too. And now that she's seeing that the tide has turned, she wants to get on the right side of the argument. So that would be more like her, I would think so.
That would eliminate the contradiction that Jasmine pointed out.
Now, I agree with him, and that's the impression I got first of all. Now, I may left a comment and which kind of describes it down here. And basically what I believe is that what happened is I believe Germany at least and Merkel did want the Minsk agreement to actually work, but they just weren't capable of doing it because Ukrainians at the time and currently aren't capable of making that hard decision, which was to get rid of the Nazis in Ukraine, because it was the Nazis who were bombing and kept on bombing and are still bombing the Donbass. They're still killing civilians there, and they never stopped fighting the Russians because they couldn't be stopped. I don't know, the general Ukrainian government was weaker. The army was weaker than these national battalions. That's what people don't understand. Like, I still believe that they are weaker. The Nazi battalions, like, okay, they were small relatively, but they were the best armed, the most well trained, and they were the most ruthless, and they still are. So the Ukrainian government wasn't able, like, they tried to talk to them, and they made, and that's why Zelensky was actually elected. He was kind of elected to stop the fighting because they knew there was fighting going on. So people knew that the radicals were there entrenched in Advivka and other places, and they kept on doing the things they were doing because they're racist pieces of shit that see Russians and ethnic Russians and Russian speakers as subhuman scum because they're racist. Again, if you follow the racist logic, of course, it doesn't make any sense because it's stupid, because racists are fucking stupid. but that's their ideology. That's what they believed. So they kept on doing it. And yeah, Ukraine didn't have the general Ukrainian government didn't have the ability or the determination to stop them. And so it was left up to the Russians to do it, because the general Ukrainian population kind of threw a lot in with these racists, with these Nazis, even though I still believe to this day that the majority of Ukrainians, well, they might want to join the EU, they want, the money from the West, and they want that kind of lifestyle. I understand that. I understand why they want to kind of like, they probably don't want to join the EU so much that they're willing to die for it, but I can see why they would want to be, travel to Paris and Rome instead of, I don't know. Not that Russia is that bad, but I understand, I get that aspect of, Ukrainians, why they would want to be attached to the West, but they really didn't understand the situation, or they were ignorant of the situation, and this is going to all of them now, and they weren't really willing to make the hard decision to stop the Nazis because, well, they were too strong. They would have to do it militarily. And I guess they were too useful. And so they were kind of caught in a catch-22 because if they stopped the Nazis, well, they were scared that Russia, I guess, would attack them. But if it didn't stop them, then it would guarantee that Russia would attack them, and that's what happened. And until they get rid of them, maybe once the Nazis are gotten rid of, maybe, you know, cooler heads can actually sit down at the table and make some agreement. But you know what the Nazis are doing, by the way, is they actually establish themselves up. So they're up in the north, and they're the ones who are doing all these terrorist attacks, by the way. So I don't think they're actually in this counteroffensive. I don't think they're involved that much. That's my kind of theory. And now a little bit of evidence is coming out that is a fact. They've actually like hidden themselves out. And this goes to like this all other topic of what Ukraine is actually gonna be like and who's going to be in charge of Ukraine. I think that's another topic I would like to discuss at some point, but maybe I'll just leave it at this now. And I hope you enjoyed the things that I've said.